Hi, my name is Peter Morrison and I'm a lecturer in the Dundee Business School, and this is a brief presentation on my use of online discussions as an assessment instrument. I had some concerns about the traditional assessment I was previously using for financial markets and institutions. The biggest concerns were that students often avoided parts of the syllabus, that they treated each week's information as being entirely distinct and unrelated to the previous weeks, and that because of that, students did not have any holistic understanding of the subject as a whole. I chose an online discussion as a replacement because I believed it addressed all of the concerns of the previous slide. It also gave a variety of assessment. Up until that point in the business school, pretty much everybody at the time was using 70% exam and 30% coursework, leading to boredom for the students and to some extent boredom for lecturers as well. But finally, the online discussion, I think, allows the students to develop important skills such as developing and expressing their own opinion, learning how to take account of the viewpoint of others, arguing coherently, moving the debate further through identifying new angles and moving to reasoned conclusions. And these contributed towards the Abertay graduate attributes of the time, and indeed those which are being proposed at the moment. I was a bit nervous about the use of online discussions as nobody in the business school had used them before, so initially I trialled it and used it as only 20% of the assessment, covering only a small part of the syllabus. Without going into detail at this point, doing this I learned what worked and what didn't work, and that allowed me to reflect and to get the confidence to eventually move on and make the online discussion 100% of the module grade. The kind of lessons I learned were in terms of group size. I found that the optimum was 6 to 8. Anything smaller than that creates problems, and anything bigger than that creates problems of a different kind. So 6 to 8 would be what I would recommend. Also, students should only really see posts from members of their own group. Without going into details here, allowing them to see what other people post in any other group creates problems. One of the most important things is the clarity of the instructions that you give the students, so there's no doubt as to what's expected of them, and also the quality of the feedback and feed forward that students get. The better I've got at giving this information, the better the results I've got back from my students. The students only have 1 week to post for each discussion, and when the end of week comes, then a new discussion opens. So I do send the students reminders to post, and that way I've reduced substantially the number of non-submissions. The biggest lesson I've learned is to be careful about what I say in class. By that I mean that there's a real danger in tutorials in particular that the students latch on to what I say and assume that what I say, in my opinion, are what they have to say in their discussions. And therefore, I only get the same old every time if I allow that to happen. So I'm extremely careful about what I say. I often play devil's advocate. I often give contradictory opinions to what I really believe to make sure that I do everything I can to make sure the students see every side of an argument and develop their own opinions. Students are expected to post at least twice per week, and I tell them that twice is the optimum. They need a second post so that they can have a riposte to anything that anyone has said about their post. They are allowed to post more often than twice per week if they wish, but only if it has a purpose, and they're penalised if those posts are just them trying to take over the discussion rather than to make an important point. Be very careful as well about using guide lengths for contributions. Students love guide lengths, but this is a discussion, remember, and is it really proper to give people strict guide lengths? So I'm very careful about how I use guide lengths. This is what I see when I open up the online discussions. You'll notice on the left-hand side near the bottom there's a tab that says online discussions for ease of access. I see all of these because I'm the module tutor. Each student would only see the discussion forum for their particular group. And when they go into that folder, again, I can see every week's discussions. The student would only see one at a time. And we use adaptive release so that they only see one at a time. They're all set up right at the start of the semester, but adaptive release means that they open and close at 9 o'clock on a Monday morning. They open 8:59, the following morning they close, and then the next one opens up. You'll notice that last year I used week 2 as a formative assessment, a mock discussion, and students could contribute, and then week 3 I gave them feedback, and then they reflected on that, and from week 4 to week 12 they had the actual discussions which were assessed. As I'll discuss in a moment, I'm no longer going to use that week 2 in that way for formative feedback. I'm using a different mechanism this year. This is what one of the questions might look like. In this particular case, I was asking them to look at an article on a BBC News website. In fact, in this particular case, it was a video, and listen to Warren Buffett, one of the world's most successful investors and richest men. And I was asking them to comment particularly on one particular aspect of short-termism that Mr. Buffett was talking about. This is what a student contribution might look like. Now, I appreciate the writing is very small there, but to be honest, I wouldn't expect you to read this. It would not be of interest to most of you who are listening to this discussion. But I think the thing I want you to see is the kind of size of the discussion, the fact the student has used references at the bottom, and also at the start she said, I disagree with a particular student's views. So the students are encouraged not just to look at their own stuff and to go onto the post and react as if no one has ever answered anything before, but to look not only at my post, but at all the posts that have gone before they're on and react to that. And that's just what this student's done here. And this student has, in a relatively concise way, actually made some very important points. Operational aspects are that the groups are randomly allocated by Blackboard. The students are given comprehensive instructions, and discussions are open for precisely 7 days, and as one discussion closes, a new discussion opens. After all these years of using these discussions, I continue to learn lessons. I'm making a change this year to the feed-forward mechanism. I discovered that the formative assessment I've used in the past is really not working properly. It's the one aspect of this where students don't really engage. They engage very well when the discussions start for real, but in the formative assessment they don't really. So what I'm going to do now is a different format where I will actually give them an anonymized version of previous discussions with my comments all over them, so that they can see what my thinking is and why I think a particular comment or a particular discussion was good, and what grade it might have achieved, and also why I think a particular comment or a particular discussion was bad and what grade it might have achieved. I've also been using Twitter. I won't go into detail at this point because this is a short presentation, but I use Twitter as part of this module, and I'm discussing with Alison how I might extend the use of Twitter. I will also now be putting the discussion question out a few days before the discussion opens. This is mainly to benefit some dyslexic students I've had in the past, one of whom last year was very severely dyslexic and has suffered greatly with the time it took her to read the questions. So I'll be giving them out a few days in advance, but all students will be getting that. And I've also started allowing the students to develop the discussion beyond the initial question. This is one aspect that we have to be very careful of. When I started doing this, the students had a tendency to go off topic, shall we say, and actually go beyond the initial question before they'd actually answered the initial question. So I now give very clear instructions on this, but if the question has been answered, I don't want people just repeating stuff because they've got to make a second post and the topic has been done to death already. So where it's appropriate, develop the initial discussion beyond the initial question and show higher learning. And I have used catch-up in the past, but with the change in the calendar this year, all students will now be given the chance to catch up in week 14. The benefits I've discovered from using these online discussions, without question, students exhibit deeper learning than they ever have in the past, and also they're learning from their peers in a way they never did before. Students are seeing the links between all of the different topics and all of the different parts of the syllabus in a way that they didn't necessarily see before. And without question, I have much higher levels of student engagement. I tend to have no fails, and where I have fails, it tends to be non-submission. And if I have a non-submission, it tends to be a student who is not attending class, not only in my class, but not attending right across the board. So if I've got a student who is normally at university, then they are attending my classes, they are contributing to my discussions, and they are passing and passing well. And despite the fact that I think that this is a more demanding assessment than the previous examination and coursework that I gave, I am actually seeing better student performance. So I hope that brief presentation was of interest to you, and if so, and you want to discuss it with me, then here are my contact details. Thanks very much for listening.